according to my computer time, it's 10:30. So we'll get started with the prayer. You can join me, please. May the God of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of glory, give us the spirit of wisdom and understanding as we continue this Lenten Bible study. Open our hearts to the knowledge of Him. Open our eyes to the wisdom of Him. May the words of wisdom that are revealed to us in the Holy Scripture enlighten us, that we may know what is the hope and glorious inheritance to which He has called us. Amen. Okay, we can get rid of this. And we can't. Oh, songs. Good. What? I understand the lottery's up to $1 billion. Is that right?
That's what they say.
You all bought your ticket, right?
No.
No?
Not yet. We're going.
You heard about the guy who decided to pray to win the lottery? He prayed for 365 days and never won the lottery. And finally on the 366th day, God spoke to him and said, "You know, you got to meet me halfway on this one. Would you please go out and buy a lottery ticket?" There's a pretty powerful lesson there, though. I've actually used that in a sermon. You know, sometimes when we pray to God for things, we have to do our part, right?
Yes.
Can't pray to stop smoking and then go buy cigarettes.
Yeah, right.
Anyhow, what's our game plan today? Well, we're going to look at a little video. Hopefully we're going to get through Song of Songs. And then I want to do a parable or two. And then I have some handouts having to do with passion, death, and resurrection. And because it's Holy Week, we might want to talk about that a little bit. That's the game plan. Let's hope it works. Okay? You can't rehearse these things, all right?
No.
So, let's watch the video. And pray that it works. It works great at home all the time. Here it just does some crazy stuff. There's the video on the Song of Songs. Song of Songs, I'm sorry. Do I wait a little longer, Tom? Excuse me. Okay. God.
The Song of Songs. It's a well-known but not so well understood book of the Bible. It's 8 chapters of love poetry. And while there is an introduction and a conclusion, the book doesn't have any kind of rigid literary design, and that's because it's a collection of poems. They're not meant to be dissected or taken apart. They're meant to be read as a flowing whole and simply enjoyed. The first line of the book tells us that it's the Song of Songs, which is a Hebrew idiom like the Holy of Holies or the King of Kings. It's a Hebrew way of saying the greatest thing. So this is the greatest song of all songs. Then we're told in the first line that this Song of Songs is of Solomon, which could mean that he is the author. His name does begin the book, after all. But as you read the poems, you discover that the main voice is that of a woman called the Beloved. And while there is also a male voice, it does not seem to be Solomon's. Solomon is mentioned a couple times in the poems, but he's never a speaker. And you do have to admit, Solomon is a very odd candidate as the author of this book, given the fact that he had 700 wives. For the lovers in the Song of Songs, they are the only ones in the world for each other. So the of Solomon likely means in the wisdom tradition of Solomon. He was known for his wisdom, his poetry, his love of learning about every part of life. And Solomon became the father of wisdom literature in Israel. And so his legacy is here carried on through a collection of love poems that explores the human experience of love and sexual desire. The opening poem introduces us to the basic theme of this book. We hear the voice of the young woman who delights in her man, a shepherd. Now, she's not married to him yet, but it becomes clear that they're engaged and they cannot wait to be together. From the introduction, the poems flow back and forth from the woman's voice to the man's, shifting from scene to scene without any kind of clear linear sequence or storyline. The poems move in these symphonic cycles, and key images and ideas get repeated and developed. So, one of the basic themes uniting the poems is the intense desire that this couple has for each other, expressed through their constant seeking and finding. So, after the opening poem, they're separated but on the hunt for one another. So the woman calls out, or she'll wake up from a dream or go looking for her lover, and more than once they'll find each other, they'll embrace, and then right when things start to get a bit racy, the scene will suddenly end, and a new one will start. They're separated, looking for each other, and on it goes. Another repeated theme is the joy of the couple's physical attraction for one another. So multiple times they'll pause and describe each other with these elaborate metaphors. And here it's very helpful to know that these images and metaphors in Hebrew poetry are not primarily visual. If you try and paint a picture of these people based on the metaphors, you will end up with something that looks very, very strange. What you're supposed to do is reflect on the meaning of these images as they relate to the man and the woman. So you'll read through the poetic cycles, and the tension will keep building, and their desire and joy and attraction. And this spiraling repetition is a poetic way of heightening and focusing on the mystery and power of sexual love. It all comes together in the conclusion, which pauses to summarize what these poems are all about. Love is as strong as death. Its passions are as severe as the grave. Its flashes are of fire, a divine flame. Many waters cannot extinguish love. Rivers cannot sweep it away. If one were to give all the wealth of one's house for love, he would be utterly scorned. The poem highlights the power and the intensity of love, how it's both beautiful but also dangerous. Like fire, love can destroy people if it's abused, or be life-giving if it's protected. Ultimately, love expresses the insatiable human longing to know and be fully known and desired by another. Love is one of the most transcendent and mysterious experiences in human life, and as a part of the Bible's wisdom tradition, this book says it's a gift from God. After this, there's an odd poem about Solomon trying to do what the previous poem just said was impossible, to buy love. The woman rejects Solomon's offer, and then the book concludes with the man and the woman. They're separate once more on the hunt for each other. He calls to hear her voice. She begs him to run away with her, and that's how the book ends. Just totally open-ended. But that's a lot like love, which never truly concludes, because there's always more to discover and pursue in your beloved. And so true love has no end, and neither does this book. Now, through history, the big question raised by the Song of Songs is, what on earth is love poetry doing in the Bible? There have been three main interpretations of this book throughout history. In Jewish tradition, it's been read as an allegory, each character a symbol. So the woman is Israel, the man is God, and their love is a symbol of the covenant between God and Israel made at Mount Sinai and the giving of the Torah. This view flowed into the Christian tradition, but the characters were swapped. So it's about Christ's love for his people, the church. And this interpretation was inspired by Paul's words in Ephesians 5, that a Christian husband's love for his wife is a symbol of Christ's love for the church. What's interesting is that in the last 100 years, archaeological discoveries among Israel's ancient neighbors in Egypt and Babylon has turned up all kinds of ancient love poetry that's very similar in language and imagery to the Song of Songs. We see that love...
I'm just stopping it for a minute because I want you to notice the hair on Solomon. Goats and sheep. Keep that in mind as we read the scripture today. Okay?
Poetry was a meaningful part of Israel's cultural environment, which has led most scholars today to view the Song of Songs as what it presents itself to be, an arrangement of Israelite love poetry reflecting on the divine gift of love. But that doesn't mean that it's only ancient love poetry. There's a key feature of these poems that sticks out when you read them as a part of the Old Testament, and that's the overwhelming use of garden imagery. There are powerful echoes of the Garden of Eden and the idyllic scene between the married couple in the early chapters of Genesis. So the image of the man and the woman naked and vulnerable, but completely unified and safe with one another. This resonates in the background of the Song of Songs. It's as if in these poems we are witnessing the love of a couple whose relationship is untainted by selfishness and sin. And so ultimately the song holds out hope that even though our own relationships are so often distorted by selfishness, love is a transcendent gift, and it's meant to point us to something greater, to the gift of God's love that will one day permeate and transform His beloved world. And that's what the Song of Songs is all about.
Now you know the rest of the story, right?
The book of Ruth. It's a brilliant work.
Okay, we heard you once, that's enough. I got lucky today. That lady that showed up one time at the end of the video didn't show up again today. Those of you who were here that day know what I'm talking about, okay? All right, let's talk about the book of Psalm, a Song of Songs. It's a wonderful book, but you have to read it more than once to really get its message, and then you probably still won't get its message. But it's a really good book. It's sometimes called Canticle of Canticles. It might say that in your Bible, or Song of Solomon. It means the greatest of songs. Authorship. I'll just show you my chart here again. Some say it may have been Solomon. I doubt it very much. More likely was someone using Solomon's name. Or if you look at our timeline here, Solomon lived around in this 1100 BCE, right in this time frame. If he would have wrote it, it would have been written right here, but it was probably written after the exile, after the Israelites came back from the Babylonian exile. And one of the reasons that scholars believe that's when it was written, not written by Solomon, but again, a ghostwriter or somebody who used Solomon's name, is that apparently in the original Hebrew text, there were some Aramaic words used, and the Hebrews didn't speak Aramaic until after the exile. So again, it's just for your information, doesn't make any difference. He talked about this in the video. I'm going to get rid of this. He talked about this in the video, that it's an allegory, the use of the story to illustrate an extended point. An example would be like the Good Samaritan, parable of the prodigal son, that type of thing. Rabbinic Judaism held that it was an inspired allegory about the love of God and His people. Okay, God and the Israelite people, the chosen people. Some Catholic scholars see it as a marriage of Christ to the church, which I find is kind of interesting because Christ and the church don't appear until after the crucifixion of Jesus, which is well beyond the time that the Song of Songs would have been written, right? Well, I have a hard time with that one, but it's out there. Many Catholic scholars agree that it can also be seen as a description of ideal love between a man and a woman. And that's the way we're going to treat it here today. When we read the text, it will be, we have two very gracious volunteers in our audience. Fred and Patty are going to read the beloved and lover part, and Donna's going to read the friends part. So you'll see that as we read the text. Rabbinic Judaism and Catholic scholars agree that it is seen as a covenant relationship established by Adam and Eve and witnessed by God. So it is based on the marriage covenant that was made by Adam and Eve, where Adam and Eve make the covenant between themselves, and then God witnessed the covenant to make it a covenant of marriage. And the marriage is still a covenant today. That's exactly what happens in a marriage. The couple actually makes the covenant, shares the marriage vows with one another, and then a deacon, priest, or a bishop is a witness to that covenant. It's the only sacrament where the people themselves actually evoke the sacrament among themselves, okay? and it was elevated to a sacrament by the church. The NIV, the prologue, NIV, what does it stand for? I got a blank.
New International Version.
New International Version. Thank you, Tom. The memory isn't as good as it used to be. You know? Anyhow, the New International Version prologue describes it as a love poem between a woman and her lover. But if you were to look at other translations of the Bible, which some of you have, it probably would talk about that relationship between Israel, God, and the Israelite people. Right? It's the only book in the Bible where persons are identified in the text. For example, if you're reading it, beloved might be identified by a B, who is the bride, and the friends by a D, who are the daughters of Jerusalem, and the lover by a G, which is the bridegroom. And we'll see that when we get into the text today. Now, not all Bibles have that. Not all Bibles have identified who the person is. Song of Songs is unique with that, and not all of the translations have it even in Song of Songs. For this class, we'll see it as a love poem, like I said, between a woman and her lover. Word of warning, it's racy Hebrew poetry. Okay? So, if your ears aren't prepared for this, then maybe you probably... No, I'm not asking you to leave. All right, the outline, and this is from the NIV Bible, okay, is as follows. There's a courtship where the man is courting the woman. It's kind of interesting. Well, we're going to read that. Then there's the wedding itself, and then there's vivid expressions of love after the wedding, okay? The honeymoon. And then there's some conflicts and solutions, okay? The bride and the groom don't always agree on everything. Then it ends with never-ending love at the chapter 8. I thought I would just review with you. You probably already know this. There are 4 expressions of love, but in our American English, we use one word for the different types of love. For example, I can say that I love roses. That's a valid use of the word love. I can say that I love each and every one of you. That's a valid use of the word love. But I can say that I love my sons or daughters. That's a valid expression. I love my wife. That's a valid expression, but they all mean something different. And the Greeks understood that. So they had 4 words for love. Eros, which is a love of your senses. It's an erotic love. If I say I love roses, I love the smell of the rose, right? I love the color of the rose. That's my eyes, my smell, my eyes. I love the feel of the rose petals. But what happens when the rose dies and there's no rose petals anymore? Eros love dies with it, right? And there are some spines on the rose that can inflict damage.
Yes.
This is what happens when people get married on Eros love. When things change between the two of them, the love dies, and then there are the thorns that they have to deal with. But it's a valid expression of love. Eros love is in the book of Song of Songs. You'll see that. Then there's the filial love. That's the love that God says that we are to have to one another simply because we're made in the image and likeness of God. So, again, I can say I love all of you, and that's an expression of filial love. Our founders of the country knew about filial love. They named a town after it, a city after it. Philadelphia, city of brotherly and sisterly love. And then there's the love of family. That's expressed also in Song of Songs. Storge love, right? And then the highest level you can get, agape, unconditional, sacrificial love. That's the kind of love that Jesus had for us. But that's the kind of love that we should have for our spouses, right? And we have for our children. We had a thing on our refrigerator that said, people need loving the most when they deserve it the least. And sometimes you have to apply that kind of love to your children, right? And sometimes even to your spouse. I know my spouse has to apply that to me. I'll speak for myself on that one. unconditional, sacrificial love. Anytime I would instruct the people that I witnessed a marriage to, I would tell them, when you say your wedding vows, and this is the whole traditional wedding vows, you'll say, for better or for worse, richer or poorer, sickness and health. You're not going to choose which of those 6 that you are going to accept. You take all 6 of them. And you have to deal with that through a marriage. That's the unconditional part of it. Sacrificial part of it, there's a lot of ways to deal with that one. People make a lot of sacrifices for their children and for their spouses. Now I'll talk a little bit about the 3 stages of a Jewish wedding to help you again understand a little more about Song of Songs. The first was the engagement. And that was made when the child was born. It might even have been made before the children were born. It was made by the parents. But interestingly enough, under Jewish law, at the age of 12, the girl could say she did not want to marry the boy that the parents or the matchmaker had made up. Okay? Then the second stage of betrothal was the betrothal. And that was the stage that Mary and Joseph were in. Right? That's the same as what we consider our wedding. And where Fiddler on the Roof made it appear that the decision and the matchmaker and the parents was final, that's not necessarily true, because the Torah says that every person has a right to choose whom they wanted to marry. Now, obviously, the Torah probably wasn't always followed by some of the Jewish sects that are out there. Okay? But that was in the Torah, and the Torah was law. It was the same as being married, but the couple didn't live together. And it could only be broken by a divorce. And the third was marriage, and that lasted for a week or longer. The couple usually stayed at home in their village, and people would come to visit them throughout the week as they celebrated their honeymoon. Okay, that was their honeymoon, essentially. Okay. All right, a little bit of background. Let's look at the text. I think you're going to find this book very interesting. At least I did. And like I said, we have 2 volunteers who are going to act in the role of the beloved and the lover, and Donna's going to be the friend. So let me just read this before we start reading. It's a sidebar in my Bible. It says, part of the understanding of the Song of Songs is discerning who is speaking. This book is used a song collection with a unified theme that tells the beauty of romantic love as it progresses from courtship to marriage. Although the Hebrew text does not identify the speakers, they are detected by the context of the Hebrew words. So that's how they determine who the speakers are. So I think with that, Fred and Kathy are ready. Fred and Patty are going to be beloved and lover and... Oh, let me make this statement before we start. There's some scholars who think that this was a marriage of Solomon to one of his wives, right? Okay. And also the speculation is that it could have probably been one of Pharaoh's daughters. But we're going to see that gets this, perhaps is not true when we read the very first part of the text, and I'll explain why. So, you 2 are up.
Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your love is more delightful than wine. Pleasing is the fragrance of your perfumes. Your name is like perfume poured out. No wonder the maidens love you. Take me away with you. Let us hurry. Let the king bring me into his chambers.
We rejoice and delight in you. We will praise your love more than wine.
How right they are to adore you. Dark am I.
Excuse me, put your microphone more right in front of you like that. Yeah, okay.
How right they are to adore you. Dark am I, yet lovely, O daughters of Jerusalem. Dark like the tents of Kedar, like the tent curtains of Solomon. Do not stare at me because I am dark, because I am darkened by the sun. My mother's sons were angry with me and made me take care of the vineyards. My own vineyard I have neglected. Tell me, you whom I love, where you gaze your flock, and where you rest your sheep at midday. Why should I be like a veiled woman beside the flocks of your friends?
Okay, just a minute. If this were, first of all, in that culture, I didn't know this, but in that culture, a pale-complected woman was what was desired. Which is kind of interesting because you would think in that part of the world, most of the women would have a pretty much darker complexion or an olive complexion. But pale was the desired. And that's why she talks about her being dark. The other thing that rules out Pharaoh's daughter for me, and maybe it doesn't for you, is that she worked out in the sun. That's where she got her darkness, right? And she actually worked in a vineyard, and then she was a tender of flocks, sheep. I don't think Pharaoh's daughter would have been doing that. Unless you all see it differently than me, right? Yeah.
How about the timing? Pharaoh was way back when they left Egypt, wasn't it? How was there?
Well, but there were still pharaohs after they left Egypt.
I see.
Yeah, yeah. You're right. But this is far beyond that. But there still would have been pharaohs ruling Egypt, okay? So anyway, I wanted to point that out to you, okay? I think that the bride in this case is not Pharaoh's daughter. But that's just my interpretation. Okay, Donna, you can read.
If you do not know, most beautiful of women, follow the tracks of the sheep and graze your young goats by the tents of the shepherd.
I liken you, my darling, to a mare harnessed to one of the chariots of Pharaoh.
Okay, I'm going to stop a minute there. How many of you called your beloved a mare harnessed to the chariots of Pharaoh? Not? I don't think that's a very... But anyhow, that's Hebrew poetry. Okay, continue, friend. I'm sorry.
Your cheeks are beautiful with earrings, your neck with strings of jewels. We will make your earrings of gold studded with silver.
Okay.
While the king was at his table, my perfume spread its fragrance. My lover is to me a sachet of myrrh, resting between my breasts. My lover is to me a cluster of henna blossoms from the vineyards of En-Gedi.
How beautiful you are, my darling. Oh, how beautiful. Your eyes are doves.
Okay, stop for a minute. Doves means innocence and charm. Okay, so when he's referring to a dove here, he's referring to her innocence and charms. Okay. Again, I don't know how many of you, when you were courting your spouse, used that kind of language, but that's okay. All right, let's continue.
How handsome you are, my lover. Oh, how charming. And our bed is verdant.
The beams of our house are cedars. Our rafters are firs.
Okay, stop there for a minute. Again, where some people think this may have been Solomon, is the beams of our house are cedars and rafters, would imply the temple. Possibly the temple, okay. So that's another. All right, continue.
I am a rose of Sharon, a lily of the valleys.
Like a lily among thorns is my darling among the maidens.
Like an apple tree among the trees of the forest is my lover among the young men. I delight to sit in his shade, and his fruit is sweet to my taste. He has taken me to the banquet hall, and his banner over me is love. Strengthen me with raisins, refresh me with apples, for I am faint with love. His left arm is under my head, and his right arm embraces me. Daughters of Jerusalem, I charge you by the gazelles and by the does of the field. Do not arouse or awaken love until it so desires. Listen, my lover, look, here he comes, leaping across the mountains, bounding over the hills.
Okay, stop for a minute. Do you get a mental image of this guy just kind of running and going and really charged up, right? He's got to show her what he's capable of. But there's one point here. Go back. He has taken me into the banquet hall, and his banner over me is love. The banner standard actually sort of symbolizes troops, not, let's say, a prenuptial, not prenuptial, what I'm trying to say, a dinner before you're wed. Okay, I know what you call those in today's world. So it's kind of interesting that he used the image of a banner, okay, which is kind of a militaristic term at that time.
Does that mean he is willing to protect her?
Excuse me?
Does that mean he's willing to protect her?
That's a good point. Yeah.
Repeat
What?
the
Great.
question, please.
It means that he's willing to protect her. That's a really good observation. Yes, Tom.
Yeah, in the NRSV, it's instead of banner, it says intention.
Ah. Very good.
That's very different.
Yeah, it's very different, isn't it? So that's one of the things we always have to be concerned about, what the other translations of the text mean. Okay. All right, let's go on. I'm gonna move on a bit. Okay, I think you get the flavor of the lover and the beloved, and he's courting her. And now we get to chapter 2, verse 10. All right, and this is the wedding. No, I'm wrong. I said it wrong. Here's what I wanted to go to. Chapter 3, right? I'm going to skip over some because I think you're getting the flavor of what's going on here, okay? This is an interesting chapter, okay? Because they're not married yet. Excuse me. They're not married yet. So, Donna, would you start reading that? And if you're all at chapter 3, please.
Is that where it starts? All night long on my bed?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All night long on my bed, I looked for the one my heart loves. I longed for him, but did not find him. I looked for him, but did not find him. I will get up now and go about the city, through its streets and squares. I will search for the one my heart loves. So I looked for him, but did not find him. The watchmen found me as they made their rounds in the city. Have you seen the one my heart loves? Scarcely had I passed them when I found the one my heart loves. I held him and would not let him go.
Okay, let's stop there. Some interpretations of this is that, because they weren't married yet, so they shouldn't be living together. They shouldn't be sleeping in the same bed, right? And yet it sounds like that's what's happening. And some scholars say, no, this was a dream that she had. A dream about going out, losing her lover, and looking for him. Later on, the same thing is going to occur after they are married. It's almost a repeat of the same dream. But there's one little caveat there, okay? Now let's go to the wedding itself, which is chapter 3, verse 6. Okay? And the lovers and lovers will come back to you, okay? So, Donna, would you read that starting at verse 6? And this is their wedding, all right?
Who is this coming? Is that what we're...
Yeah.
Who is this coming from the desert like a column of smoke, perfumed with myrrh and incense, made from all the spices of the merchant? Look, it is Solomon's carriage, escorted by 60 warriors, the noblest of Israel, all of them wearing the sword, all experienced in battle, each with his sword at his side, prepared for the terrors of the night. King Solomon made for himself the carriage. He made it of wood from Lebanon. Its posts he made of silver, its base of gold. Its seat was upholstered with purple, its interior lovingly inlaid by the daughters of Jerusalem. Come out, you daughters of Zion, and look at King Solomon wearing a crown, the crown with which his mother crowned him on the day of his wedding, the day his heart rejoiced.
Okay. Again, can you get a mental image of what's happening here? Here's this King Solomon who has 300 wives, and he's getting one more, but you have this regal procession bringing him to his bridegroom, right? With the chariots and all the splendor of what a king would have. It says his seat was upholstered with purple. Purple was the color of royalty, right? Considered the color of royalty. So this passage suggests that it was Solomon. But remember, Solomon wasn't writing this. Somebody else was. It may have been. We don't know. All right, now they're married. Okay, now time for the arguments to start. No, not really. No. Let's see what the lover has to say now to his new bride.
How beautiful you are, my darling. Oh, how beautiful. Your eyes behind your veil are doves. Your hair is like a flock of goats descending from the Mount Gilead. Your teeth are like a flock of sheep just shorn. Come up from the washing.
Okay, stop a minute. I'm sorry I had to laugh because I was thinking of the video. Okay, and again, we don't talk like this. I mean, your hair like a flock of goats. Your teeth are like a flock of sheep, but shorn. I would get in a lot of trouble if I said that to my wife. Before or after we were married. Anyhow, but again, this is Hebrew poetry, all right? But it's good entertainment. It shows that, well, anyhow, let's continue, Fred, okay?
Coming up from the washing, each has its twin. Not one of them is alone. Your lips are like a scarlet ribbon. Your mouth is lovely. Your temples behind your veil are like the halves of a pomegranate. Your neck is like the Tower of David, built with elegance. On it hang 1,000 shields, all of them shields of warriors. Your two breasts are like two fawns, like twin fawns of gazelle. They browse among the lilies until the day breaks and the shadows flee. I will go down to the mountain of myrrh and to the hill of incense. All beautiful you are, my darling. There are no flaw in you.
Okay, read the next line, then we'll stop.
Come with me from Lebanon, my bride.
Okay. Here's the first time the word bride is used. Bride is used. And if we were to continue to read this whole thing, which we're not because we just don't have the time, I think you get the flavor. He refers to as his bride at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times that I count in this text, okay? So it's clear that they are married now. They are man and wife, right? Now let's go back to verse 16, beloved.
Awake, north wind, and come, south wind. Blow on my garden, that its fragrance may spread abroad, that my lover come into his garden and taste its choice fruits.
Okay, use of the word garden. Remember, this is about the covenant of marriage that was made between Adam and Eve, and where did that take place? In a garden, okay? So this is the Song of Songs, the wisdom literature's way of reinforcing the covenants that God has made with the Israelite people, right? All right, let's see what happens here. The lover.
I have come into my garden, my sister and my bride. I have gathered my myrrh with my spice. I have eaten my honeycomb and my honey. I have drunk my wine and my milk.
Eat, O friends, and drink, but drink your fill, O lovers.
I slept, but my heart was awake. Listen, my lover is knocking. Open to me, my sister, my darling, my dove, my flawless one. My head is drenched with dew, my hair with the dampness of the night. I have taken off my robe. Must I put it on again? I have washed my feet. Must I soil them again? My lover thrust his hand through me through the latch opening. My heart began to pound for him. I arose to open for my lover, and my hands dripped with myrrh, my fingers with flowing myrrh on the handles of the lock. I opened for my lover, but my lover had left. He was gone.
Okay, stop there for a minute. Remember, this happened just a few verses before, where she wakes up and she doesn't find her lover, but now it's her husband. So they are married now, okay? So now let's see what happens.
My heart sank at his departure. I looked for him, but did not find him. I called him, but he did not answer. The watchmen found me as they made their rounds in the city. They beat me, they bruised me, they took away my cloak, those watchmen of the walls. O daughters of Jerusalem.
Just stop a minute. The watchman found her and beat her. Well, if this is a dream, it's not a big deal, but if it's not a dream, it is a big deal. Why would they do that? There's no real explanation for that. Right? Okay, continue.
O daughters of Jerusalem, I charge you, if you find my lover, what will you tell him? Tell him I am faint with love.
Now, the other possibility here is that it is real, that they've had an argument, their first lover spat, and he's left, and now she's out looking for him. That's another possibility, right? Well, let's go to friend.
How is your beloved better than others, most beautiful of women? How is your beloved better than others, that you charge us so?
My lover is radiant and ruddy, outstanding among 10,000. His head is pure as gold. His hair is wavy and black as a raven. His eyes are like doves by the water streams, washed in milk, mounted like jewels. His cheeks are like beds of spice, yielding perfume. His lips are like lilies, dripping with myrrh. His arms are rods of gold set with chrysolite. His body is like polished ivory, decorated with sapphires. His legs are pillars of marble, set on bases of pure gold. His appearance is like Lebanon, choice as its cedars. His mouth is sweetness itself. He is altogether lovely.
Okay. I think, excuse me. Oh, let's read the friends part first.
Where has your lover gone, most beautiful of women? Which way did your lover turn, that we may look for him with you?
This implies that there's something drastically wrong with their relationship, their marriage. It's gotten into trouble. He's run away. And now the daughters of Jerusalem, the friends, want to help her find him. Okay? And then she has an explanation for that.
My lover has gone down to his garden, to the bed of spices, to browse in the gardens and to gather lilies. I am my lover's, and my lover is mine.
So she's trying, finish it, I'm sorry.
He browses among the lilies.
So she's trying to reassure him that everything's okay, right? Reassure these friends, these daughters of Jerusalem that they're called. Okay, let's continue with the lover.
You are beautiful, my darling, as Tirzah.
Okay, Tirzah is a city in north of Jerusalem. So he's comparing her to which is apparently a very beautiful city, by the way.
Lovely as Jerusalem, majestic as troops with banners. Turn your eyes from me. They overwhelm me. Your hair is like a flock of goats descending from Gilead. Your teeth are like a flock of sheep coming up from the washing. Each has its twin. Not one of them is alone. Your temples behind you, your veil, are like the halves of a pomegranate. Read the same things.
Yeah, it's a repeat, okay. So we kind of get the idea. They come back. They get back together, okay. And we're going to move on to, because I want to finish this up, because I want to get into a couple of parables. Because I think you're getting the flavor for Song of Songs, right? Yes. You're going to see what it's like. All right, let's go to chapter 8. We'll start there, and then we're going to finish it up and look at, like I said, a couple of parables. Donna, do you want to read that?
If only you were to me like a brother who was nursed at my mother's breast. Then, if I found you outside, I would kiss you and no one would despise me. I would lead you and bring you to my mother's house, she who has taught.
Okay. This is an interesting passage, okay? Because she's saying she can't kiss him in public, which is true. Bride and groom couldn't kiss each other in public, but a brother and a sister could. Figure that one out, right? Anyhow, that's one of the little things about it. Okay. Let's go to verse 6, Donna.
Place me like a seal over your heart, like a seal on your arm, for love is as strong as death. Its jealousy unyielding as the grave. It burns like blazing fire. Like a mighty flame, many waters cannot quench love, rivers cannot wash it away. If one were to give all the wealth of his house for love, it would be utterly scorned.
Okay. They've had a lover spat. They've come back together. And place me like a seal over your heart. Remember what the kings used to do in the day of kings and queens? If they wrote a letter or something, or a royal proclamation, they would put a wax on it and then seal it with a ring, okay, to make it official, right? This is what this is all about. They are placing a seal on their marriage bond, and it's not going to be broken. That makes sense? Yes. All right. So, let's just finish with the friends and beloved and lover, and then we'll go on. So, Donna, I guess it's your turn again.
We have a young sister, and her breasts are not yet grown. What shall we do for our sister for the day she is spoken for? If she is a wall, we will build towers of silver on her. If she is a door, we will close her with panels of cedar.
I am a wall, and my breasts are like towers. Thus I have become in his eyes like one bringing contentment. Solomon had a vineyard in Baal Hamon. He let out his vineyard to tenants. Each was to bring for its fruit 1,000 shekels of silver. But my own vineyard is mine to give. The thousands of shekels are for you, O Solomon, and 200 are for those who tend its fruit.
Okay, this suggests that this is her dowry that she was bringing to the marriage, to the relationship or the marriage. I don't know what 1,000 shekels would be worth. I didn't do the math, but probably quite a bit, All right? All right, let's finish it up.
You who dwell in the gardens with friends and attendants, let me hear your voice.
Come away, my lover, and be like a gazelle, or like a young stag on the spice-laden mountains.
Okay, and so it ends. Everybody lives happily ever after, right? Just like a fairy tale. Now, what I suggest that you do, you've got the concept of the Psalm of Songs, the storyline, okay? If you want, go back and read it again, right? You can do this or not do this, okay? If you have a spouse or a partner, you can read it together, and one can be the beloved and one the lover, and one you'll have to divide the friends up amongst yourselves, okay? My wife and I did that, okay? So, yeah, just a suggestion, all right? It's a wonderful story, right? You like it?
It's racy.
It's racy.
What?
It's very exotic. It's racy.
Racy, yeah, it's racy Hebrew poetry.
Yeah.
Exactly. I want to thank Fred. Alan. Yeah, I got it written down here. Patty, oh boy, I'm so terrible with it. Fred and Patty for playing the part of the lover and the beloved. Okay, I think they deserve a hand.
Yes.
And Donna for reading. I just thought it would be better to do it that way than passing the microphone around. Okay. Here's what I'd like to do with the remaining part of our time, if we can. I'd like to, since the parables are all considered part of wisdom literature, next week we're going to meet in this room over here. I don't have a video to show you. I haven't found a good one, but it's going to be dedicated. What is it? Bellamy room. it'll be on, the whole time we'll spend on Sirach. Sirach's the largest wisdom book, and so it'll take a full time. What I'd like you to do now is turn to Matthew 20, and we're going to read that parable. So if you find Matthew, chapter 20, it's 1 through 16. It's a short one. You're probably familiar with it, but I just want to try to make some points. So, since Donna read and Fred and Patty read, maybe you want to pass the microphone on to somebody. Carol, maybe. Carol, can you read?
Popcorn reading. I picked Jude.
Oh, okay. And this is the parable of the workers in the vineyard.
Is this on? Yeah. Okay. You want to start reading 20?
Huh?
20, start with 20.
Chapter 20, verses 1 through 16. Yep.
For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went
Really,
out.
hold the microphone like that. Yeah. So it doesn't.
See what I'm looking at. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. After agreeing with the laborers for the usual daily wage, he sent them into his vineyard. When he went out about 9 o'clock, he saw others standing idle in the marketplace. And he said to them, "You also go into the vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right." So they went. When he went out again about noon and about 3 o'clock, he did the same. And about 5 o'clock, he went out and found others standing around. And he said to them, "Why are you standing here idle all day?" They said to him, "Because no one has hired us." He said to them, "You go into the vineyard." When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his manager, "Call the laborers and give them their pay, beginning with the last and then going to the first." When those hired about 5 o'clock came, each of them received the usual daily wage. Now when the first came, they thought they would receive more, but each of them also received the usual daily wage. And when they received it, they grumbled against the land owner, saying, "These last worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us, who have borne the burden of the day and the scorching heat." But he replied to one of them, "Friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree to work for me for the usual daily wage? Take what belongs to you and go. I choose to give the last the same as I gave to you. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or are you envious because I am generous? So the last will be first, and the first will be last."
What's our first reaction to this parable?
It's wrong.
It's wrong. It ain't fair.
No,
It's not fair. Because that's the way we think.
right.
But I think I said it in this class before. I know I said it in one of my classes. When you try to think like God, you can't do it. You can't think like God thinks, okay? So in this parable, who is the owner of the vineyard? God, right. And what is God? God is paying a wage. What kind of wage do we get from God?
Life after grace.
God's grace, right? In God's grace, God can do with God's grace whatever God wants to do with it. And that's what the parable of the vineyard is all about. Yeah, it doesn't sound fair to us. I've seen people who, on their deathbed, have decided that they were going to become a member of a church. And their spouse worked all of his or her life in the church. And now suddenly they become a member of the church, and bingo, they get an eternal reward. And you say, that's not fair. Well, here's my message. If any of us in this room think we can control God's grace, then I want to get to know you very, very well, okay? Because you now have made yourself better than God. You put yourself above God. And we can't do that. It doesn't seem fair to us because that's the way we think. We're humans. And, we can't change that. But the message of the parable, for me, is don't try to control God's grace. It's not up to us to do that. And we can't judge somebody else's soul. It's not up to us to do that. It's up to God. And I'll be very honest with you. I am very thankful that I don't have that responsibility. I'm happy to give it to God, I want to do it. Okay? Let's go to Mark 4, 26 to 29.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah, of course. You're free to say anything you want.
Oh, my. Anyway, it's often thought that scholars say that the people that came in first were the Jews, and the people that came in last were the Gentiles. And the Gentiles are getting God's grace as much as the Jews did.
Yep.
And maybe the Jews don't think that's fair. But I like what you said. I think that's fair.
But that's a very good point. Parables are meant to be interpreted differently, right? And Tom's interpretation of it is as good as what mine was, okay? Although mine's better. Sorry, Tom.
Can't
All
win
right.
for losing.
No, it's chapter 4, 26 to 29. I think that's right. Yeah.
He also said, "This is what the kingdom of God is like. A man scatters seed on the ground night and day, whether he sleeps or gets up. The seed sprouts and grows, though he does not know how. All by itself. The soil will produce grain. First the stalk, then the head, then the full kernel in the head. As soon as the grain is ripe, he puts the sickle to it, because the harvest has come."
You have been sitting here all morning looking at what's on this board, haven't you? Well, this is the parable of the seed. First it's the blade, right? Then it's the blade with the stalk. And then it's the blade with the stalk with the head. And then it's the blade, stalk, head. And now the seeds start to form. And then the last is the blade, stalk, head with the seeds ripened. And the harvester comes and cuts it down. What did Jesus describe for us? Path to the end times, right? This is a timeline, right? As to how close we are to the end of time. The second coming of Christ. Here's the trick. Which one of these are we on? Are we at the blade? Are we at the blade with the stalk in the head? We don't know. Right? There's been a lot of predictions. I got a book, 99 Reasons Why the Rapture Will Come in the Year 2000. I'll sell it to you for a very good price.
Oh, my God.
Well, it's, not worth much, right? Here's the only thing that I can say about the end of time, when it will happen. At the end of today, we'll be one day closer. Right? That's the only thing that's up for sure. Until then, we don't know where we are at on this timeline, but what's the message? The message is we need to be prepared for it at any time. That's what the message is. Okay? Now, I had one more parable, but it's 11:30. Let's see. I have a handout. Maybe somebody could help me with this. It has to do with Holy Week. These are each separate. Thank you. Appreciate it. And I'm going to get this up on the screen. Handing those out. Okay. You should be getting something like this. Okay? And this is something that I put together. I've actually never presented it at a class. So you're my first recipients. If you look at the top, I have Jewish month and day, and the Jewish month of Nisan 13, Nisan 14, Nisan 15, Nisan 16. That's the name of the Jewish month, Nisan. Passover always occurs on Nisan 14. That was the day that the Jews celebrated Passover. So Passover is celebrated on Nisan 14. Nisan 13 had to be preparation day for the Jewish Passover, which meant lambs were being slaughtered in the temple. Nisan 13. It's a movable feast. What I mean by that, it's like our Christmas. One year it occurs on Wednesday, and the next year Thursday, Friday, except it goes all over the place, all right? I don't understand the Jewish calendar, right? So if we look at the Gospel of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the Synoptic Gospels, right? And we look at the day of the week, what we call Holy Thursday, Good Friday, Holy Saturday, and an Easter Sunday. If we look at Holy Thursday, and the other thing we got to get in our mind when we think about the Passover and Holy Week and what we're entering into, the Jewish day began at sundown. And sundown was determined when you could see 3 stars shining brightly in the sky. That was sundown, and so the Jewish day began then. So, for example, if we were at Nisan 13 today, here, at sundown today, we would go to Nisan 14. Make sense? Okay. So we have what we call Holy Thursday, Good Friday, Holy Saturday, and Easter Sunday. In the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Holy Thursday is Nisan 13, preparation day for the Jewish Passover. And the Jewish Passover begins, and Nisan 14 begins at sundown. And Jesus eats a Passover meal with his disciples. It's a Passover meal. It's a Seder meal, or Seder. You can read the stuff in it on your own here. I'll just highlight some things. This one happens to be from Luke. Luke calls it the Last Supper. He calls it the New Covenant. And Luke uses the word, do this in remembrance of me. The agony of the garden was recorded after the meal, and Jesus sweats drops of blood. Only in Luke does he sweat drops of blood. And then we go to Good Friday, which is the Jewish Passover, right? Jesus is taken to Herod, all of that. He's condemned to death, right? He forgives the repentant thief. It's only in Luke. There's an eclipse of the sun from noon to 3. They divide his garments by casting lots. And Joseph, a virtuous and righteous man, is named as the one who assists at the burial of Jesus. Now, one of the things that first century Jews living in the time of Jesus, there were 3 things that they wanted out of life. One was to live a long life. One was to have lots of children. And one was to be given an honorable burial. Jesus missed out on 2 of them. Now, Jesus was a condemned criminal. So under Roman law, you didn't bury him. They threw him in a common grave far away from the city because of the stench, of course, all right? But because the Romans would honor Jewish law, and Jewish law said that you had to have an honorable burial, the family could ask for the body even though it was a criminal, and the Romans would give it to them. So that's what happened in Jesus' case. Even though he was tried as a criminal, he would have been thrown in a common grave. Nicodemus and the family asked for his body. On Easter Sunday, we're going to read about the ladies who go to the tomb to anoint his body, right? But this is what happened on Good Friday. So then at the end of Good Friday, at sundown, The Sabbath starts, and the Sabbath is celebrated all day on Holy Saturday, and on Easter Sunday, Jesus raises from the dead. That is the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. There's some differences between those three Gospels. I just encourage you to read the other charts that I have here on Mark and Matthew. But I want to go to John. Because John portrays this much differently, and you will see the Passion of John read, or we will hear the Passion of John read on Good Friday. Okay, John is always read on Good Friday. But there's a huge difference in the Gospel of John with respect to the meal that Jesus eats with his disciples. You will see this. In the Gospel of John, Nisan 12 is on Holy Thursday. Nisan 13 is on Good Friday. And remember, I said 13 was preparation day for the Jewish Passover, right? Nisan 14 is Holy Saturday, and Nisan 15 is Easter Sunday. Now look what happens. On Holy Thursday in John's Gospel, Nisan 13 begins at sundown. It is not Passover, so Jesus eats an evening meal with his disciples, but it is not a Passover meal. Washing of the feet is the emphasis. Service is the emphasis. There's no institution narrative in this meal, all right? Jesus is arrested in the garden, but there is no agony in the garden. Jesus doesn't sweat drops of blood like he did in Luke, right? And then Malchus is a slave whose ear is cut off. You remember that? And Jesus heals him after Peter cuts the ear off, right? So, on Holy Thursday, Nisan 13 begins at sundown, which means that what we call Good Friday is preparation day for the Jewish Passover. What happens on preparation day for the Jewish Passover? Lambs are slaughtered in the temple. What happens on Good Friday? Jesus is condemned to death at 12 noon at the same time that lambs are being sacrificed or slaughtered in the temple to make Jesus the last Paschal lamb that ever would have to be slaughtered for the atonement of sins. John's Gospel treats the passion very differently than Matthew, Mark, and Luke. That make sense? Okay. So you continue on what we can call Good Friday, Jewish Passover, and the Jewish Sabbath in Nisan 14 begin at sundown. And in John's Gospel, Passover and the Jewish Sabbath are observed and both end at sundown, which is different again from the Synoptics. And Jesus is raised from the dead on Easter Sunday or Nisan 15. Make sense? Hopefully this will help you understand the Passion reading on Good Friday. Now we got just enough time. I should have had these opened up. Give me time, I'll find it. Okay. Accounts of Jesus' resurrection. You should have this. This is a lot easier. Okay? For some reason, I couldn't get this table to move up, so the first page is blank. All this tells us, you can go to Mark 16 and read, the first to arrive at the tomb, you all have that in front of you, is Mary Magdalene, and Mary the mother of James and Salome. And they're worried about who's going to roll back the stone. When they arrive, it's already rolled back. The first to enter the tomb is Mary Magdalene and Mary. And the first to appear to Jesus is first Jesus appears to is Mary Magdalene, right? And then in Mark's Gospel, Jesus appears to the 11 disciples. He commissions them to go out into the whole world and proclaim the gospel to every creature. And then he says this, which is kind of interesting. Proclaim the gospel to every creature. Man, woman, child, animal, whatever, right? And whoever believes and will be baptized will be saved, and whoever does not believe will be condemned. Jesus ascends to heaven on Easter Sunday in Mark's Gospel. Now you go to Luke's gospel, kind of a duplicate, except there's some changes. Mary Magdalene and Joanna and Mary, the mother of Jesus, are the first to arrive at the tomb. Mary Magdalene and those ladies enter the tomb. And there's two men, unnamed, that Jesus says has risen from the dead. Peter is the first disciple to enter the tomb in Luke's gospel. Jesus appears first to the two travelers on the way to Emmaus. Remember that story?
Yes.
When they break bread, they recognize him. Jesus appears to 11 disciples in Jerusalem. He uses the greeting, peace be with you. He commissions his disciples to be witnesses to what they have seen and heard. It's not a baptismal thing, okay? In Luke's gospel, Jesus ascends into heaven on Easter Sunday. Now, if you read the Acts of the Apostles, Luke changes his mind and has him ascend 40 days after Easter Sunday. You have to change of heart. Matthew is pretty much the same, right? There's no specific person mentioned in Matthew's gospel to enter the tomb at first. Again, Jesus appears to Mary Magdalene, to the women. There's an earthquake in Matthew's gospel. It rolls back to, okay, I'm sorry. No, it's not in this gospel. That's why I can't find it, okay? There is no ascension of Jesus mentioned in Matthew's gospel. Now let's go to John. Same thing, Mary Magdalene, but she does not enter the tomb. She enters it, but she does not enter it, okay? Peter is the first to enter the tomb. You can read about these others here. And then Jesus appears to the 10 disciples. Significant events. He says, peace be with you. Receive the Holy Spirit. Whose sins you forgive, I will forgive. And then he appears to Thomas, who says, my Lord and my God. And then Jesus commissioned to Peter, and is 3 times he asks Peter, do you love me? It's kind of like Peter denies Jesus 3 times. Jesus now asks 3 times, do you love me? And Peter says, yes, Lord. You know I love you. And Jesus says, feed my sheep. And then Jesus says, Peter, do you love me? And Peter says, yes, Lord, I love you. And he says, tend my lambs. And then the 3rd time, Jesus asks Peter, do you love me? He says, yes, Lord, I love you. And Jesus says, feed my sheep. That's our commissioning, okay, from the 4 Gospels. Matthew, Mark, they go out into the world and baptize. Luke says to be a witness to the things that we've seen and heard. And John says that we are to tend his sheep. Make any sense? Okay. We are at the end. We missed one parable. We'll probably try to do it next week. Yes?
We don't have that page that you have up.
Say it again.
We don't have that page that you have up.
This one here?
Yeah. That's there's 2 different stacks. They got passed around.
Okay.
This is the...
Is it in there?
No.
No.
I don't know where...
I will get it to you next week.
Yeah.
Okay? Sorry. Yeah. All right. We are done. Go home and read songs, okay?